I'm going to ask you one last time. Step off the yacht." The words rang out, crisp and cold, slicing through the warm Florida night like a slap in slow motion. The music didn't stop, but it dimmed behind the weight of that sentence. Laughter faded. Champagne paused mid-pour. A soft breeze rolled in from the marina, but on that luxury deck, the air had gone completely still. All eyes were on him. Malik Carter, 36 years old. Tall, poised, broad shoulders beneath a tailored midnight blue suit. His skin a deep, polished brown that shimmered under the yacht's ambient lighting. He wasn't causing a scene. Wasn't shouting. Wasn't holding court near the bar or the VIP section. He was just there. And somehow, for the hostess, that was enough. She stood about 10 feet away, posture stiff as her tone. Platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, clipboard in hand. Designer heels planted firmly like she owned the boat, and everyone on it. "I don't care what your invitation says," she said again, louder this time. "You're not on the list. And you're not welcome." Her voice was sweet on the surface, but each syllable dripped with something sour. People started shifting, uncomfortably. Some turned their backs. Others lifted their phones, pretending to text, but their cameras were rolling. And Malik, he didn't flinch. He took another quiet sip of champagne and glanced toward the railing, like he was weighing the sky. What do you do when you're dressed right, you're on time, you have the credentials, and still, the door shuts in your face? Have you ever been in a room where every glance is a sentence? Where being calm feels like a threat? Where silence is louder than screaming? That's where Malik stood. Not in defiance, but in dignity. Not to argue, but to endure. Because what came next, after that moment, after that accusation, after the cameras started recording, wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. And 5 words from Malik Carter would flip the entire night upside down. 2 hours earlier, the sun was just beginning to dip beneath the Miami horizon, painting the water gold. The Silver Majesty rocked gently at its dock, a 120-foot luxury yacht glowing in the amber light, trimmed in chrome and pride. Strings of soft bulbs were already lit across the upper deck, flickering like stars that knew the night would be expensive. Malik Carter arrived without fanfare. He didn't need it. He stepped out of a sleek black SUV wearing a suit that didn't shout, but whispered wealth. Midnight blue, Italian cut, a subtle sheen under the light. His shoes. Glossy black Oxfords. His watch. A limited edition Tag Heuer he'd once bought himself after his company hit its first $10 million quarter. He paused at the edge of the dock, looked up at the yacht, and exhaled slowly. Not from nerves, but memory. Because 10 years ago, he was on these same docks, scrubbing dishes for a catering company that couldn't afford to feed its staff from the leftovers. Back then, the yachts were castles. Now, he wasn't looking up. He was stepping on. The invitation had come from Greg Thomas, one of his early investors and longtime mentor. Greg had texted him earlier that week, "You've more than earned this. Come see what you helped build." So here he was. He walked the gangway alone, steady, purposeful. Not flashy, just present. The way power often is when it knows its worth. And that's when he saw her. Rachel Vaughn. She was the kind of woman who didn't just manage events, she managed optics. Crisp white dress, clipboard tucked close to her ribs, and a smile so polished it nearly reflected. She was laughing at something a guest said, until she caught sight of Malik. Her face didn't freeze. Not entirely. But there was a flicker. Just a breath of confusion. Then something else. Something calculated. She straightened her shoulders, recentered herself, and nodded at him, but it wasn't warmth. It was the kind of acknowledgement you give someone when you're not quite sure which door they're supposed to use. Malik nodded back politely. No chip on his shoulder. No agenda. He didn't need approval to exist here. Not anymore. But what he didn't know was that Rachel had already filed him under question mark. And by the time the night was over, she'd wish she hadn't. The thing about rooms like this, yachts filled with people who never think twice about where they belong, is that the real conversations rarely happen out loud. They happen with eyes. And Malik Carter had learned, over years of boardrooms, lounges, and networking dinners, how to read every one of them. The quick up-down scan from the man in the navy blazer near the bar? That was a mental checklist. Shoes. Polished. Suit. Expensive but understated. Watch. Quality. Skin tone. Pause. Confusion. Then dismissal. Like his math didn't add up. The woman near the hors d'oeuvres table, in a red designer dress with a neckline sharper than her smile? She looked Malik up and down like he was a puzzle piece that had fallen into the wrong box. Her lips barely moved when she leaned toward her friend and whispered, "He's not even dressed for this." Her friend gave a small nod. Agreement disguised as politeness. No one said anything offensive. No one raised their voice. But the temperature shifted. The space around Malik became tighter, thinner, like the oxygen had been rationed and his share had run out. He walked through the crowd with quiet grace, saying hello when greeted, smiling when smiled at. But each step forward felt like moving through invisible resistance. Eyes didn't just land, they lingered. Not curious. Not intrigued. Just questioning. Have you ever walked into a place and instantly felt like someone pressed the pause button on the vibe, just for you? That was this. And Malik didn't miss a second of it. He'd seen it before, too many times. At investor pitch nights where he was mistaken for the intern. At tech conferences where security asked for his vendor badge. At luxury hotel receptions where the valet assumed he was there to park a car. But tonight? This wasn't new. What was new was how familiar it still felt. That sting. It wasn't anger anymore. It was exhaustion. Still, Malik kept his pace. Not slow. Not rushed. Just steady. Because when you've built something from nothing, you learn the hardest lesson early. Don't let someone's assumption become your reality. And that night, on that deck, beneath all the sparkle and champagne, a storm was already building. It just hadn't struck yet. Malik hadn't even made it to the second step onto the main deck before she intercepted him. Rachel Vaughn. Hostess. Event coordinator. Gatekeeper of tone. She stood near the entrance, clipboard clutched tight, eyes sharper than her stilettos. Everything about her screamed perfection. Perfectly styled hair, perfectly arched brows, perfectly composed demeanor. But the thing about perfection, it cracks easily when caught off guard. "Good evening," she said, voice sweet, practiced. "Can I help you?" Malik smiled politely, offered a brief nod. "Yes. Malik Carter. I'm here for the gala. I believe I'm on the list." She didn't return the smile. Instead, she glanced down at her clipboard, started flipping through pages with the kind of speed that suggested she wasn't actually reading anything. Her fingers moved fast. Her eyes didn't follow. "What was the name again?" she asked, louder this time. "Malik Carter." Still flipping. Behind her, a pair of guests glanced up, curious. A third leaned just slightly in, enough to listen. "That's strange," she said after a beat. "I'm not seeing that name here." Her tone was polite, but the way she said it wasn't. It was that brand of performative confusion, loud enough to let others hear. Like an accusation dressed in silk. Malik didn't flinch. He reached into the inside pocket of his blazer, pulled out his digital invitation on his phone, the event email still open, subject line in bold. Confirmed RSVP, Malik Carter, gold tier guest +1. He held it out toward her. Rachel didn't take it. She gave it a cursory glance. Quick, dismissive. "That may be a mix-up," she said, her smile now tighter, thinner. "This is a private event. Maybe you were meant to be with the service team." Behind him, someone let out a muffled laugh. Another voice whispered, "Yikes." Malik didn't react. But inside, something shifted. Not anger. Recognition. He had seen this dance before, where doubt hides behind etiquette and bigotry comes dressed in pearls. Rachel stepped slightly to the side, blocking the path forward just enough to make a point. "I'm going to need you to wait over there while I double-check," she said. Malik looked at her. Direct. And for a split second, she looked unsettled. Because something in his eyes told her he wasn't the one out of place. There's a special kind of silence that only happens when a room full of people all agree to pretend they didn't hear something ugly. That was the silence on the deck of the Silver Majesty. Rachel Vaughn had just suggested, loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear, that Malik Carter might have been meant for the service crew. And no one said a word. But the eyes? They said plenty. One man near the seafood station shifted awkwardly and looked down at his drink, as if the condensation on the glass had suddenly become very interesting. A couple seated near the live jazz trio stopped mid-conversation, their smiles frozen, then slowly faded into neutral expressions. Everyone heard. Everyone saw. And not a single soul stepped forward. Because that's the unspoken rule in rooms like these, isn't it? Don't get involved. Don't challenge the host. Don't question the woman with the clipboard and the confident voice. Even if she's wrong, especially if she's wrong. A woman in a navy blue gown whispered to her date, maybe he's at the wrong event. He shrugged, didn't look up. Doesn't look like someone who drops 6 figures on a charity ticket. Malik stood still, calm, watchful. He wasn't going to shrink. Not again. Not here. But the steers kept piling on. Some curious. Some smug. Some with that faint flicker of pity, the worst kind of all. Because pity isn't compassion. It's condescension in a velvet box. And Malik could feel the weight of it pressing against him from every direction. Every judgment, every assumption, all wrapped in linen and jewelry and champagne flutes. He didn't need anyone to speak out loud. Their body language did it for them. The half-turns. The subtle steps away. The forced laughter that came just a beat too late, too loud. He wasn't part of the atmosphere. He was the disruption to it. But here's the truth that no one on that yacht expected. Malik Carter had spent a lifetime reading rooms exactly like this. He didn't just see their silence. He understood it. And he knew exactly what it meant. They weren't ignoring him. They were watching, carefully, hoping he would back down. But not tonight. Rachel's smile vanished. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But like a flame running out of oxygen, quiet and quick. She tapped her earpiece, then glanced toward the lower deck where 2 uniformed security staff were standing near the catering crew. One of them, a tall, lean man in his late 20s, maybe early 30s, noticed her subtle nod and began walking over. His stride slow, careful. Like he could already sense this wasn't a simple noise complaint. Malik didn't move. He stayed exactly where he was, his shoulders relaxed, hands still at his sides. Calm. Centered. The kind of calm that made some people nervous, because it didn't match the narrative they were trying to build. Rachel's voice turned tight. "We have a situation," she said, not to him, but to the approaching guard. "This gentleman refuses to identify properly, and may be trespassing." She never raised her voice. She didn't have to. She had tone. And in rooms like this, tone is a weapon. The security guard, his name tag read Luis, stopped a few steps short of Malik and glanced between them. You could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to remove someone, or protect them. "Sir," Luis said cautiously, "can I ask for your name?" Malik looked at him. Just looked. Not with anger. Not even with defiance. Just presence. Then, without breaking eye contact, he said quietly, "Do you know who I am?" Not a threat. Not a boast. Just a question. And it worked. Luis hesitated. His weight shifted from one foot to the other. His hand hovered near the radio clipped to his belt, but he didn't reach for it. His eyes flicked to Rachel, waiting for clarity she didn't have. Rachel stepped in, sharper now. "This is private property. He has no listed credentials. Please escort him off the yacht." Malik turned slightly, just enough to face her. Still calm. Still unreadable. Then he folded his hands behind his back, not in surrender, but in control. Like a man who knew the next move was his to make. And for the first time that night, Rachel didn't look certain. Because even though she had the clipboard, the security team, the assumed authority, Malik Carter had the room's attention. And silence had shifted sides. Malik didn't flinch. Didn't argue. Didn't raise his voice. He simply reached into his inner jacket pocket, slow and deliberate, like a man who had no urgency because he had nothing to prove. The room leaned in, just a little. Even the ocean breeze seemed to stall, waiting. He pulled out his phone, sleek, matte black, understated, and tapped the screen twice. Then he put the call on speaker. The name at the top? Alicia Tomlinson, Director of Operations, National Health Tech Foundation. The lead organizer of the very gala they were standing on. 3 rings. Then a voice, warm, professional, confident. "This is Alicia." Malik didn't look at anyone, not even Rachel. His voice was low, smooth. "Alicia. It's Malik Carter. I just arrived at the yacht. I'm beat." Then her voice changed. "Oh my God, Malik. Yes. We saw your RSVP, you're checked in. Greg said you'd be stopping by after your investor meeting. Is everything okay? Now the silence hit different. A shift. Like the sound of glass cracking in slow motion. Rachel's face paled. Guests turned fully toward them. Someone near the bar dropped their fork. Malik remained still. He didn't gloat. Didn't smirk. He just let the truth float in the air. Alicia, he said gently, I've been asked to leave. Apparently, I'm not on the list. The gasp wasn't loud, but it was deep. And Rachel? She blinked like she'd just been splashed with cold water. Alicia's voice came sharp through the speaker. That's impossible. You're one of the primary donors. You're on the VIP panel in 30 minutes. Rachel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Alicia continued. Who exactly told you that, Malik? He didn't answer. Because he didn't need to. Rachel stepped back. Her clipboard lowered like it had gained weight. Malik ended the call with one slow tap. Then looked at Rachel for the first time in minutes. Still no anger. Just presence. The kind of presence that makes people remember what respect feels like. And right then, on that deck under the Miami sky, the power dynamic didn't just shift, it flipped. There's a moment, a split-second shift, when everyone realizes they've misjudged the room and the person standing in it. That moment had just arrived. Rachel Vaughn, once the gatekeeper of the evening, was now holding a clipboard like a broken shield. Her cheeks flushed a color no amount of foundation could hide. She opened her mouth to explain, but no words came. Malik didn't interrupt her silence. He let it linger. Because when you've been doubted your whole life, sometimes the loudest statement you can make is none at all. Across the deck, conversations restarted, but not like before. These weren't light chats about investments or vacation homes. These were murmurs. Did she just try to kick him out? Wait, he's one of the keynote speakers? Malik Carter? That's the Carter MedSync guy, isn't it? A man near the bar, earlier smug, now uncertain, pulled out his phone to Google quietly under the tablecloth. Meanwhile, Rachel forced a smile, brittle and hollow. I wasn't informed about an update to the guest list, she stammered. I assumed. That's the problem, Malik said, his voice smooth but unmistakably firm. You assumed. He didn't say it with venom. He didn't have to. Because the weight of those two words landed heavy. Rachel glanced around, but no one was stepping in to rescue her now. Her confidence was slipping through her fingers like sand, and the tide was rising. Malik turned slightly toward the crowd. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't call anyone out. He simply existed in the space that was always his to begin with. And for the first time, the guests weren't just seeing him. They were realizing they hadn't seen him at all. A woman near the entrance whispered, "That's why he didn't get angry. He didn't need to." Exactly. Because this wasn't revenge. It was revelation. The kind that cracks through the polished surface of exclusivity and forces people to look inward. And Rachel? She had just gone from hostess to headline. And all she could do now was try not to fall apart before dessert was served. Malik didn't wait for an introduction. He didn't need one. He simply walked forward, toward the center of the upper deck, where a small mic stand stood beside a branded backdrop, untouched until now. The crowd parted without being asked. No pushing. No whispers this time. Just a quiet collective step back, like everyone instinctively understood the moment had changed shape. He reached the mic, adjusted it just slightly, then paused, not for dramatic effect, but because sometimes silence says more than a monologue. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. Not icy. Not sharp. Just steady. I wasn't going to speak tonight. He let that line settle. I came here to listen. To support. To quietly honor the brilliant minds this event was meant to lift up. But sometimes, silence isn't the right response. He didn't name names. He didn't mention Rachel. He didn't need to. Every eye on that deck had seen what happened. And now, every ear leaned in, not out of guilt, but something deeper. Respect. Malik continued. See, people talk about innovation like it's just about technology. But the truth is, real innovation starts with mindset. It starts with how we see each other, who we make space for, who we listen to, and who we try to silence. Not a breath moved. No glasses clinked. No plates scraped. Even the ocean seemed to hush itself. He took a step back from the mic, folded his hands in front of him. Tonight's about the future. Not just of health, or tech, or startups, but the future of what leadership looks like. And I'm proud to stand here, not because I was invited, but because I belong. And that sentence, I belong, hit harder than any confrontation ever could. There was no applause right away, because people were still absorbing it, still rewinding the last 30 minutes in their minds and seeing it all through a new lens. Malik stepped down from the platform with the same quiet grace he'd walked up with. He hadn't spoken to retaliate. He'd spoken to remind them. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard. Sometimes, the clearest message comes from simply standing your ground, with dignity intact. As Malik stepped down from the platform, the crowd remained silent. Not from discomfort anymore, but from reflection. Like they were watching the aftermath of something sacred. Something unplanned, but necessary. And then, from the right side of the deck, she stood. The woman in the red silk gown. The same one who, just an hour earlier, had whispered, "He's not even dressed for this." Now, her eyes told a different story. There was no smugness. No forced smile. Just a quiet humility that softened the sharpness in her face. She stepped away from her table, smoothed her dress, and with a voice barely louder than the breeze, said, "Mr. Carter, would you like to sit with us?" There it was. The gesture. A seat. At her table. At her side. In full view of everyone. It could have been a moment of redemption. But Malik didn't move right away. He looked at the chair. Then at her. And then he offered something even more powerful than acceptance. He smiled. Then. Polite. Measured. And he walked past her. Not coldly. Not with spite. But with the kind of quiet grace that said, "Thank you, but I choose my own space." And just like that, she understood. The offer had been sincere, but late. Because seats at the table mean nothing if they're only offered after you've been proven worthy. The real test is who's invited in before they ever have to prove themselves. Malik made his way toward another group, young founders, interns, underrepresented students who were there on scholarship. The ones no one had noticed until now. He sat with them, laughed with them, listened to them. And just like that, the center of gravity on the yacht shifted again. Not toward the power they thought they recognized, but toward the power they had overlooked. The woman in red sat back down, quietly, eyes on her plate. She didn't speak again that night, because some lessons don't come through embarrassment. They come through watching someone choose presence over pride. And for those who paid attention, that moment rewrote the definition of class. He didn't pull it out for attention. He didn't wave it in the air or flash it under bright lights. Malik reached into his blazer pocket with the same quiet precision he'd used all night. No rush. No theatrics. Just intention. And when his hand emerged, he was holding something small. Simple. A matte black leather card case. Worn at the corners. Slim. Minimal. He opened it slowly and slid out a single card. Black. Thick. No name. Just a gold-embossed logo. Clean. Elegant. Recognizable only to those who knew what power looked like in its most understated form. From across the deck, an older gentleman, gray suit, silver hair, caught sight of it. He froze. Then leaned toward the woman beside him and whispered something urgent. Her eyes widened. Her mouth parted, silent. Because they recognized it. The founder's card. Not the flashy kind given to big donors. Not a platinum or a centurion. This was bespoke. Private issue. You don't apply for one. You're invited. It was the kind of card issued only to individuals who don't just contribute to empires, they help build them. The man at the piano, who had played with effortless confidence all evening, stopped mid-chord. Someone near the champagne bar gasped. And then, like a ripple cutting through still water, the realization spread. Malik Carter hadn't just been invited to this event. He had financed it. He hadn't just supported the companies in the room. He had launched them. Rachel Vaughn stood frozen a few feet away. Her eyes locked on the card. Her clipboard now just a useless prop clutched to her chest. "I didn't realize you were affiliated at that level," she muttered, voice barely above a whisper. Malik tilted his head slightly. Calm. Measured. You weren't expected to know, he said. There was no sarcasm in his tone. No gloating. But everyone there understood what he meant. You didn't care enough to know. And now? Now the silence wasn't awkward. It was necessary. Because one man had just redefined what power looked like. And he'd done it without raising his voice, only his standard. The night air was cooler now. The kind of breeze that slips through luxury with no regard for status, just presence. Overhead, the city lights blinked from a distance, Miami's skyline humming like a memory still unfolding. The Silver Majesty, once a floating symbol of prestige and curated exclusivity, now felt like a different ship altogether. Malik stood near the rail again, same place he'd been earlier that night. Except this time, he wasn't alone. He was surrounded, quietly, by attention. Not the kind you chase. The kind that follows. Guests who hadn't made eye contact before were now finding reasons to get closer. To apologize. To ask questions. To subtly want to know the man they'd ignored. And Malik. He didn't soak in the spotlight. He didn't chase redemption from strangers who'd already revealed how easily they judged. He just stood. Present. Still Malik Carter. Someone handed him another glass of champagne. He accepted it, but didn't drink. His eyes were somewhere else. Not far, just inward. He was thinking about his mother. About the way she used to say, people don't always hear truth when you shout it. But they feel it when you live it. He thought about the young interns on the deck, the ones watching from the edges. The ones who had come to this gala hoping to network, only to realize the real lesson wasn't on the stage. It was in the silence that followed a man standing his ground. Because here's the thing about power. Real power doesn't need permission. It doesn't scream. It doesn't need to prove anything. It shows up. It stands still when pushed. It speaks calmly when dismissed. And when it moves, it shifts entire rooms. Malik didn't need to humiliate anyone tonight. He didn't need revenge or validation. What he needed, and what he claimed, was visibility. Respect. Not because he demanded it, but because he embodied it. Rachel Vaughn was still on the deck. Still clutching her clipboard. Still trying to hold her place in a story that had moved on without her. She watched as people began to orbit Malik. The same people who once looked past him now leaning in, laughing softly, asking for cards, shaking hands. But what mattered most wasn't their recognition. It was Malik's restraint. He had reminded an entire room of something most had forgotten. Dignity doesn't rise when you shout. It rises when you stay standing. So the next time you walk into a room that tells you, without words, that you don't belong, don't shout. Don't shrink. Just stay. And let your presence do the talking.